We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Sarah Jones-Simmer. She is the CEO of Found. Sarah, so good to see you. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Hi, Christina. So nice to meet you, and thank you for having me. I actually was really excited to get this opportunity to speak with you and AllVoices because I have a connection to AllVoices founder and CEO Claire. We didn't quite overlap, but we worked at the same company and handed things off, probably a decade ago, which feels really special. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I struggle with this question of what did you want to be when you grow up? I still feel like I'm figuring that out, however many years later. My partner knew he wanted to be an architect from the time he was in 7th grade. And I never had that conviction around any one role. I think I've been more led by my curiosity and the types of problems that I wanted to solve, as opposed to saying I strictly wanted to be this particular role or in this particular industry.
Absolutely. That definitely resonates with me as well. I did not think I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer or know what I was going to do right when I was in school. Fast forward to today, you are the Chief Executive Officer of Found. I would love to ask, the role of work has really changed, especially over the past few years with so much going on, especially the global pandemic. One study found that 47% of employees reported their stress was higher than any experience they've had in the past, but only 37% really agreed that their organization and leaders understood what they needed both in their personal lives and for their families. How have you and Found really been showing up for the full lives of employees on your team?
Yeah. I mean, look, it pains me to hear about stress levels being that high, but I believe it. The last 2 years have been so challenging. I think for many leaders, for many operators, we think a lot about pattern recognition and playbooks and using the experiences we've had before to inform the way we operate going forward. And there is no playbook for global pandemic. None of us had ever been through this before. And I think for folks that are juggling multiple roles in their worlds, their personal lives, their family lives, their work lives, it became increasingly difficult to juggle those in an effective way. We were on all fronts having to learn a new playbook. I think a big part of it for me has been trying to be open and honest about the juggles that I'm dealing with. I have 2 young kids. They're 5 and just turned 8. Parenting during the pandemic, for lack of a better word, was a shit show. And I think none of us knew what to do with remote schooling and the juggling there. And so part of what I try to do is be open and honest about what that experience has been like for me in order to normalize it for others. I also went through a health journey during the pandemic. I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer in May of 2020, 2 months into the pandemic. And I think the lesson of how do I even juggle my personal health and work, and how do I set appropriate boundaries for what I can and cannot do? That's something I learned a lot about as well. When I was diagnosed, I was the chief operating officer at Bumble, the dating app. And I knew I wanted to work through my diagnosis, but I also felt like I didn't have the emotional bandwidth that I once did. And I was lucky enough in that moment to have a boss and a leader in Whitney Wolfe Herd who I felt like I could come to with my diagnosis and figure out what might work for me. And that meant, in my case, a narrower and deeper role, fewer direct reports, fewer responsibilities for humans, but lots of responsibility still in the business. And that felt like the right balance to me. And I think a key learning from that is that I want to be the kind of leader that Whitney was in that moment. I want to be able to be approached by people when they're facing struggles in their personal life, their personal health, their family. I think creating that culture around empathy and openness is the first step in even being able to support people through these stressful times. They need to feel like the company wants the best for them, which it does, but there are ways that we have to visibly demonstrate that to our employees. And I think one of the most foundational ways we can do it is just by being whole humans ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that it speaks eons, especially coming from, the leader of an organization too, to really set those healthy boundaries, share your story. And thank you for sharing your journey and experience with us here today on the interview series as well, and being vulnerable too. I think that's also really important for folks to hear too. In terms of, we know that a lot of leaders have been thinking about really leading with empathy. What is the role of private companies to really create more equity in the world from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think companies are one of the most important organizing forces that exist in our world today, right? Up there with school, community, it used to be religious groups. Companies are a place that we take a great deal of our identity. It informs the way we move about the world. And I think as a business leader, I have to sort of recognize and acknowledge that. And as a result, think about the important role that companies can play in creating a culture of belonging and in creating equity across our workforce. And I think companies are one of the most important levers of doing that today. So I think it's a mandate, if anything. I think that again, though, comes back to how do we create the culture and the conditions that enable people from a variety of backgrounds to thrive. We have 5 company values at Found, but 2 of them are intentionally intersecting. One is called No Two Paths Are the Same, and it really celebrates the uniqueness of our team members. It also celebrates the uniqueness of the members that we serve. Found is providing a weight care solution for folks. Everyone's journey with weight is different. Yes, it's informed by things like diet and exercise, but it's also informed by biology and lived experiences and social determinants of health and mental health. We can't treat those patients if we don't understand the uniqueness of their journey. So celebrating this idea that no 2 paths are the same is a really important cultural value for us. And that goes part and parcel with this idea of building a bigger table, which is another one of our core values. On the weight loss side, the way that we really think about that is how do we give the doctor a seat at the table? We've all thought about weight through this lens of nutrition and movement before, but there is a critical piece around biology and treating obesity as a disease, not a decision. So we've brought the doctor to the table and we've tried to create a much more integrated care model. But building a bigger table on a corporate level really means how do we get the right set of voices in the room and in the conversation so that we're looking at things from a variety of perspectives. And so I think the first and foremost way that companies can bring a culture of belonging and equity is to state that in their values and make it a priority. And luckily, we're beginning to see real evidence, like financial evidence, profitability metrics, revenue growth, that reflects that diverse cultures drive better business outcomes. And by having a variety of voices at the table, you can serve a broader customer audience. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do as businesses. So investing in things like equity for your employees actually drives better outcomes for the business as well.
I love that. I think that is so important as well in terms of building a bigger table and also living your values too, especially as a leader. I want to kind of ask about your leadership style and bringing up a specific example I saw on LinkedIn after the Supreme Court decision was released overturning Roe v. Wade in the United States. Their LinkedIn post included a screenshot of a message you sent to employees, really expressing how you're supporting them and accessibility to healthcare. Why was it important for you to share that message with your team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this was a very significant decision and it affected our employees in different ways. You know, I'm proud of the fact that we have a variety of political viewpoints at Found. I think that actually comes back to this point around diversity of perspective. And while I have deeply held beliefs on this topic, I also wanted to make clear in both my internal and external posts that I was representing my personal views. And I didn't necessarily speak for every employee at the business. At the same time, our entire business is predicated on the idea of access to high quality healthcare, right? There is a supply-demand mismatch when we think about access to weight loss solutions. 1% of doctors in this country are trained in obesity medicine. And so what we're trying to do is get more people access to world-class care. And when I look at something like the Dobbs decision, what pains me as a leader in the health space is that we are now restricting access to high quality healthcare, in many cases, life-saving healthcare. And I can't sit by and not comment on something like that as a leader who operates in digital health.
That statistic is very harrowing. And also I love the work that you and the team are doing to make it really accessible, have information out there, and also really ensure that folks have access to high quality healthcare options as well. How do you and your team at Found really support the well-being of your growing team, both from a mental, physical, and emotional standpoint too, for the folks who are, working on this incredible mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a company that's trying to help our members find better health, we have to prioritize it for ourselves. We have to live that experience across our internal team. And I think there are small tactical ways we try to do that. I mean, one of the things that I do, it's very important for me to have a movement practice. Like I love lifting heavy weights, I love walking, I love running. I put things on my calendar when I'm going to be doing that. And I share that openly on my calendar so that the team can know and understand that I'm prioritizing my physical health. I need to take care of this one body that I've got, especially after my health journey. And I want them to feel empowered to do that too. So I think modeling is a key part of that, because your company can tell you that you have a bunch of benefits and you can get this gym reimbursement, et cetera. But if you don't see your leaders modeling that, you may not feel like you have permission to do it. And then tactically, we of course have things like a wellness reimbursement. We make sure that we have high quality access to health services, including mental health as a part of our insurance programs. And we have a culture around something we call Flow Wednesdays. We've decided as a remote first company, we are all getting Zoom burnout, and we needed a day where we could just put our heads down and focus on growing the business and serving our members. And we decided Wednesdays were best for us. It's in the middle of the week. It allows catch up on things that have happened in the first part of the week. We're often doing things like metrics reviews and senior leadership team meetings on Mondays and Tuesdays. Then we can go put that to work on Wednesdays. But even just that mental break of not having to sit in back-to-back meetings, not having to be on Zooms, and enabling people to find flow, we've gotten great feedback that enables folks to really kind of reset at that midpoint in the week and find a little bit more emotional and mental flexibility.
Yeah, I love that, those moments of flow, the deep work that you cannot get in between the 5 minutes that you need a bio break in between Zoom meetings.
Yes.
Well, you really want to, the last organization I worked at too, we called it Winning Wednesdays too. So no internal
Nice.
or external meetings. So I definitely value that time as well. And you've talked about this throughout our conversation, but are there any other kind of ways you see radical flexibility really playing or manifesting in your company culture have found, especially over these past few months?
Yeah, so I think I appreciate the chance to reflect on radical flexibility. We're a remote first business, so obviously that has some inherent flexibility in it. And we try to create a culture where people can work on a timetable that works for them, can work from a place that works for them. But I do think radical flexibility in a way is probably not the right approach for our business, given we're in digital health and we're patient facing. And so there really have to be times when folks need to show up so that we can be predictable for our members, for our patients. We can meet their needs as it applies to side effects, for example, or getting a consult with a clinician. So I think it's more for us about how do we create the conditions that enable folks to do their best work on the time that works best for them, but also really show up for our members. And I think the critical link there is communication. If you need to work from somewhere else, if you need to work different hours, communicate that to your manager well enough in advance so we can plan the business around it. And then everybody can benefit from those sort of cultural norms around flexibility and remote work.
Absolutely. That effective communication, transparency, really following up is important, especially when you are a remote first organization, which AllVoices is as well. So definitely kind of meeting folks where they are too in terms of flexibility, different time zones, while also keeping it in mind that we are a client-facing organization as well. In terms of communication, we know that feedback in all of its kinds is really important, whether it's one-on-one or employee to company. How does employee feedback really manifest across your organization at Found?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we do things like regular employee surveys, and I think those are a good tool. But I actually think the best way to create a culture of feedback is in the language you use. And so I have tried as a leader and across my leadership team to reinforce that we want to ask questions like, hey, push my thinking, help me understand this better. What am I missing? What questions should I be asking? I think sometimes if you just say, hey, give me feedback, people don't quite know where to start. But if you can target that in a way that's like, I haven't fully formed this idea yet, and I recognize that you're closer to the problem. What might I be missing? Or what questions would you be asking if you're me? That's where you can get a lot of insights, whether that's on the problem you're trying to solve or some big work project, or on things like company culture and norms and how we interact with one another. But I think it's really about a posture of feedback and the specific words and pieces of language that you use to encourage that, and making sure that you don't just do it at performance review time, but that you're really trying to create a two-way dialogue throughout the way that you run and operate the business.
Absolutely. You want to have a two-way conversation, not ask for just specific moments in time, but have that culture of ongoing feedback, have the common framework and language so you're on the same page to communicate with one another as well. Sarah, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or underscoring any kind of key insights you hope people really bring with them as we close out our conversation?
Yeah, so I was having a fascinating conversation earlier this week with a woman named Kristen Yeto, who, by the way, you should try to get on your show.
Okay,
She's
great.
the former chief people officer at eBay. And she had one of the most powerful constructs I've heard around what is culture at a company. And she said culture is three things. It's the language you use, it's the stories you tell, and it's the heroes, meaning the employees, you lift up. And I thought that was so powerful, because I think a lot is said around like, oh, culture is like, do we have group workout classes, and what do our benefits look like, and do I have access to XYZ? But I think culture really more is about the fabric of the organization. And the way that is brought to life is through the words that we use, the way we engage with one another, the stories we tell. Every organization has that handful of lore stories, like their early days stories, or there's one really specific special moment. Hearing those examples shows the company what you value, shows the team what you value, and being very intentional about the stories that you tell and what you highlight really matters. And then I think the last piece around the heroes that you elevate, right? Who are those employees that are doing incredible things? And this is not about the seniority they have in the organization, but it's about the impact you're driving. How do we start to elevate more and more of those voices? And I feel like, done well, that gets us back to the conversation around equity and belonging. And as leaders, if we can be really intentional about elevating those voices, telling stories about those individuals, and hearing the impact that they have on the business, that sets the example around belonging and inclusivity for the rest of the organization. So those are Kristen's words, not mine, but they've stuck with me all week. And I really wanted to share them with your audience as well. And you should definitely try to have her on the show.
I love that. And I definitely will. And I agree that, you can say you have these incredible values, you have this culture of feedback, and you have all these benefits and policies, but also that third piece around who are the heroes and the employees, what is the behavior that you're celebrating and encouraging, modeling as a leader, as we have discussed here today, is also really important in the fabric of your company, as you were talking about as well. Sarah, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture and all of the work you're doing with your team at Found.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.